glitched. All right, I'm going to do the first one short. That way, if somebody happens to be up, they'll know I'm doing them. Not too many people doing that, but who knows. Anyway, it'll let it load faster, so I'm going to do it that way. When Mark called the sheriff's office on the radio, the dispatcher told him it might take the sheriff 3 or 4 hours to get there. Mark didn't think it would matter. Joe wasn't going anywhere. And they probably wouldn't go look for Connie if they even had the manpower until the morning anyway. Mark went back home to wait for Kurt, and when he got there, Manny was waiting for him with the 4 young people from the shootout at the Calvert farm. Mark, the kids are wondering what the president's order means for them. Can they still go, or do they have to stay here? Manny asked. That was a question for all of them, wasn't it? What did it mean for these kids, for his family trying to get here, for those like Brother Bob and his wife, who lived in a county where they would have to report to a shelter? Tell them not to worry. We'll get it figured out, and they can stay here until we do. Okay, Mark. That sounds like a plan. What about your family? I was just thinking about them, Manny. Hopefully they can still make it here. We'll just have to wait and see. Mark prayed that they would make it. What would happen to them if they got caught traveling? Would they be put in a shelter, or worse? Mark didn't like the sound of what the president had said about FEMA. How did he say it? Quote, FEMA will be empowered to detain lawbreakers and deal with insurgents until our justice system is operational again, end quote. It might be a long time before the justice system was up and running. Could FEMA imprison people without a trial until then? And quote-unquote deal with insurgents? And deal with insurgents could be translated many ways. Most of them were ways Mark didn't like. He'd asked Kurt what his opinion of the speech was. With Manny taking care of the youths and Mark realizing that there was nothing he could do at this point for his family, he turned his thoughts to the preacher. Mark found Jim and asked him what he thought they should do. It's probably not my place to say, Jim began. After all, I'm a guest here, too, but I think we should offer to let them move here. We can put them up in a tent, if nothing else. I agree. We can't let them go to a shelter. Would you get whoever you think should go with you and talk to him? You want me to go in the morning? I think you should go right now, Mark suggested. Okay, I will. Good. By the way, how did it go with Gunny today? Jim whistled. Man, he was rough today. I've never seen him so ornery. I think he's just being that way so he can treat the women the same and not get called out for discriminating. I don't think the girls can cut it. I had to keep talking to my guys today to keep them from quitting, but he still managed to make 2 of them walk. I'd get a good night's sleep. You're going to need it. Thanks for the warning. Let me know what the preacher says. You got it, Jim said as he headed off to gather his delegation. When Kurt arrived, Mark took him down to Joe's house. He looked over the crime scene and asked his technician to bag the murder weapon, dust for prints, and take some pictures. He told Mark he'd put out an APB for Connie. Mark asked if they were going to go look for her. Kurt told him she was out of his jurisdiction and he had more urgent things to deal with right now. He assured Mark someone would pick her up and deliver her back to him. Mark informed the sheriff that he was sure she'd stolen the AR-15 in addition to the liquor and drugs. He also said she wasn't knowledgeable enough to steal any magazines or ammo for it. The lawman wrote the information down in his notebook. You got time for a cup of coffee? Mark asked. Sure. Jose is going to need some time to finish his work, Kurt said, referring to the crime scene tech. Lead the way. When they got back to Mark's house, Kurt sat down at the kitchen table, and Mark put a percolator on the stove. So how did you like the president's speech, he asked. I didn't, Kurt replied sharply. I work for the people of this county. They elected me, and they are my bosses. I have no intention of kowtowing to FEMA. In fact, any feds who try to come into our county and tell us what we can and can't do can kiss my ass. Kurt had fire in his eyes and steel in his voice. Mark was surprised by Kurt's candor. He'd never seen him so passionate. Why don't you tell me how you really feel? Mark said to break the tension. Both men laughed. Then Kurt continued, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have vented at you like that. Don't worry about it, Mark replied. I may need to do the same thing sometime. Any time, Kurt smiled. It's just that I'm afraid what FEMA might do isn't the best thing for the country. With the declaration of martial law, I know he didn't call it that, but that's what it is, the Constitution can be suspended. That means they can confiscate just about anything they want, firearms, gas, vehicles, and even any food they consider being over a family's immediate needs. There are executive orders to cover all of those things and more. A lot of people, Greg's one of them, think the government has been wanting to do this for a long time and has just been biding their time until the situation was right. And what do you think? I don't think the federal government is that devious. It's just too big and unorganized. There may be some small parts of it that have plans, but the government as a whole can't even work together in the best conditions. I don't see how they could pull something this big off in the current situation. What does Greg say? I haven't talked to him yet, but I think he's going to see this as part of the UN's New World Order conspiracy he blathers about from time to time. But you don't think so? No. Maybe. Hell, I don't know what to think anymore. The lawman rolled his eyes. It sure does. It sure goes along with the conspiracy theorists have been saying was going to happen. But then, even a broken clock is right twice a day. I'm just concerned with what FEMA has planned for our county at this point. What do you think they'll do? Well, we're under the 50,000 threshold the president talked about for mandatory relocation. I'm hoping FEMA will see we don't really need any help and leave us alone. That's what I'm going to try to diplomatically convince them to do, but I have no idea what they have in mind. I can tell you one thing. I will not stand idly by and see them stomp on our God-given rights. That's good to know. Mark stood up and poured 2 cups of coffee. Something that really bothered me was what the president said about FEMA having the power to detain and deal with lawbreakers and insurgents. I can kind of understand the lawbreaker part, but what do you think the insurgent part means? Mark asked as he placed a steaming cup in front of the sheriff. Thanks. Yeah, that bothers me too. As long as the lawbreakers retain all of the problem with them being detained, but it sounds like as long as the lawbreakers retain all of their rights to a speedy trial, a lawyer and a jury of their peers, I don't have a problem with them being detained. But it sounds like the president's giving FEMA the authority to hold them indefinitely. That's not right. And what laws are we talking about? If he means that murderers and rapists can be held for a couple of months until we can try them, then that's okay in my book. But if we're talking about misdemeanors, or if we can't give even the most hardened criminal a trial in less than 6 or 8 months, then I have a big problem with it. And I'm not sure what insurgent means to FEMA. To me, it means looters and raiders. To FEMA, it may mean anyone who refuses to jump through hoops for them. I just don't know. And that's why I'm so uneasy. I guess we'll have to wait and see, huh? I guess we will, Kurt agreed.